So, shalom everyone, good evening and welcome. This is our Soul of the Parsha class, and now we're in Parashat Toldot. Parashat Toldot is very much a continuation of the previous parasha in the sense that the previous parasha dealt mostly with the matchmaking of Yitzchak and Rivka, and this parasha is a direct continuation of it, and it talks about the children being born, the two twins, Esav and Yaakov. Now, one of the most interesting things about the match between Yitzchak and Rivka, which starts in the previous parasha and continues here, is the fact that they're so different. And in fact, that's one of the simplest reasons why we're given in such detail the story of the matchmaking effort. Abraham and Sarah were told hardly anything about who they were, how they met, how they got together before their story begins with Lech Lecha. They grew up together.
She was his niece.
Yeah, they were relatives. Well, they're all relatives.
Yeah, she was his niece.
Yeah. And they grew up together. It was like a family, and their fundamental experiences of their lives, they passed together. They went together to Haran, they went together to Eretz Canaan, and then to Mitzrayim and back, and their names were changed together. And in Kabbalah, Avraham and Sarah are likened to water. They're like a pair that their love was ahava kamayim, watery love. And one of the things this means is that it says that water reflects your face, water mirrors you, it's like a mirror, and they mirrored each other. Of course, there were differences and there were difficulties, but on the whole, generally speaking, they were very similar. They were a bit like brother and sister, or uncle and niece. Abraham and Sarah go through everything together, they grew up together, and their formative experiences they pass them together, and they go through life very much as partners. But Yitzchak and Rivka are very, very different, and that's one of the reasons or explanations for why there's so much effort put into getting them together, why the story in the previous parasha told at length about how Eliezer goes to find Rivka and all the different details. How are they different? So the difference mainly has to do with how they grew up. Yitzchak grew up in a Jewish family, in a Jewish Orthodox family. He was the son of Avraham and Sarah, second generation Jew, and second generation monotheist, second generation servant of Hashem, the one invisible God in an idol-worshipping world. And Chazal call him Tzaddik ben Tzaddik, a righteous man who's also the son of a righteous man, second generation. From the moment he was born, he was wrapped up, surrounded by a holy atmosphere. And not only did he grow up in this way, but he was heavily guarded and protected so as not to be overly exposed to the outside world. And this is a recurring motif in his life. It starts with the fact that just after he's born, his mother makes sure that his elder brother, who may have a negative influence on him, is put out of the house. That's the very first thing we're told after he's born, is that Sarah says it's impossible for them to grow up together, and Hagar and her son have to be out of the house. Abraham was against it, but Hashem defended her and said, everything Sarah tells you, heed her voice. And so that's the first thing, that the negative influence was immediately taken away. Later on, we see that Abraham emulates this after Sarah dies, and he marries Keturah, and they have more children. Then once they grow up, he immediately again sends them away. And again, one explanation is that he has internalized the message of Sarah, that Yitzchak has to grow up with as minimum external influences as possible. And then finally, when in the previous parasha, when Abraham sends Eliezer to find a wife, he says he must not marry one of the Canaanite women. It's very important he doesn't marry them. You have to go back to my own family, my own tribe, the descendants of Shem, not of Ham. And then Eliezer asks him, what if, and he says, Yitzchak must never leave Eretz Israel, must never leave the land of Israel. He has to be close to me, close to the hothouse where he grew up and protected, and he should never leave. And then Eliezer asks him, but what if the woman I find would want to see him first? And should maybe then I could go back and take him to see her? And again, Abraham repeats, absolutely no. And he makes sure that Eliezer realizes this, that under no circumstances could Yitzchak leave the home. So Yitzchak here is the epitome in many ways of the, I wouldn't say overprotected yet, but I would say highly protected child. And he symbolizes this kind of approach in education, that the child needs to be shielded from the world, and it's vital that he be shielded, and that's how he doesn't, he's not contaminated. You know, his holiness, his holy soul is not damaged in any way. And even, just before we go to Rivka, even what appears to be a contrary example, the Akedah story, that he's taking to be slaughtered like a lamb, you can even see that even there he's protected from the knowledge of what's going on. He doesn't understand. He says, here at the fire in the wood, where is the lamb? And Avraham tells him, God will show us the lamb when we get there. He protects him from knowing what happens, and in fact nothing happens in the end. So even that example is just another example of how he's shielded from what's really going on. So that's Yitzchak. Rivka, total opposite. Rivka grew up in an idol-worshipping home, in a place of liars. That's how we're told that they were the Aramaic identity has to do, Arami is the same letters as Ramai, cheater. And we know that her brother is a cheater because later on is going to cheat Yaakov. And the same goes for her father and all of the environment she grew up in. And she longed to rebel against this society. And in fact, the first thing we're told about her is that she comes out. Hine Rivka yotzet. Her movement is going outside. It's not staying inside. It's going outside. And although she's very young, 3 according to Chazal, older according to some other interpreters, she's going to pull the water out of the well and to give the camels to drink. She's very independent, very active. And of course she grew up in an environment of idol worshippers and of people who are very coarse and very hard and very tough and immoral in some ways. And then she leaves this, and she's not called Tzaddik ben Tzaddik, the righteous, who's the son of the righteous parents. She's called Tzaddik ben Rasha. She's also Tzaddikah, she's righteous. But her father, her parents were Rasha, were evil men. And she had to push back against her own background and to rebel. And then she goes to Eretz Israel and she wants to join the monotheistic holy family and be part of the family, and she's absolutely part of it. But they're total opposites in this sense. So if Yitzchak is the epitome of the protected child, or the child who grew up in a very, very holy, sterile, pure environment, then she's the very opposite. She chose to be in the same environment, but only after having rebelled against where she grew up, which was very much on the outside. Then, yeah.
Can we ask a question?
Yeah.
Did you say that from the story of Yitzchak we learn how to raise the
No, I didn't say that yet. I'm saying that he
It's an
is...
example.
I said that Yitzchak and Rivka here, they symbolize, I'm not just saying anything, I'm just trying to analyze what I'm reading, and then to see where it leads us.
Because you say the word like something bad, like they protect.
Yitzchak, Rivka grew up in a totally different situation. Mm-hmm. And they're together. And they're a couple, so I have 2 people who personify 2 different life biographies and life stories and situations. And I'm not yet saying anything of what should happen. I'm only describing things for the time being. And you have to wait a little longer to see where I'm trying to... The should will come later, but it's going to be a complex should. So right now we just have this story. It's part of what's very interesting about this story. And then we also see that... Shalom. Maybe we can pick up a chair. Then we see... the two children that are born reflect the same duality. Avraham and Sarah were similar, they only had one child together. There was another child, but it had nothing to do with Sarah. So, but the couple themselves, Avraham and Sarah, they were very similar. They had one child, which was in a continuation of them. But the couple, they're not like water. They're called, Yitzchak and Rivka are like fire, not like water. Fire is more energetic, and it's more, has to do with burning something in order to have light. So it's not as soft and self-reflecting as water. It's something that has to do with, so that's why they're so opposite one another. So it's like a fiery property. And because this fiery, contradictory, polar opposites couple, it makes sense that they have two children, and the children are also polar opposites. And it's very clear, apparently, who's coming from whom. Because one son, Esav, is ish tzayid ve'ish sadeh, a man who's dealing with hunting, and who's a man of the field. He's going outside. And obviously, where do these genes, so to speak, come from, or these properties? It looks like he inherited them from his maternal grandparents. It's something that has to do with being outside, with being of this world, with being coarse, and later on, of course, he marries the same Canaanite women that Abraham was so careful, Hittite women, but they were descendants of, they're connected to Canaan. And so he appears to be, his whole sort of personality appears to be coming from Rivka's side. And then Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Oalim. Ishtam is someone who's sincere or wholehearted or innocent, and he's a dweller of tents. He only sits within the tents, and he's on the inside. So in psychology, modern psychology, it comes from Jung. We have these two expressions of two personality types, the extrovert and the introvert. And the Esav and the Yaakov seem to personify very beautifully the extrovert and the introvert. That Esav is the extrovert, he's going outside to the field, and he likes hunting, likes this world, and Yaakov is introvert. But then we see something, of course, very interesting and very surprising, but really when you think about it, it's not that surprising. We're told that Yitzchak loved Esav because of the hunting that he would feed him, kitzayid befiv, that he had hunting in his mouth. That's the literal translation. And Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. Rivka loves Yaakov. So they like the opposite child. And it's surprising, but on the other hand, it also very much makes sense, because the reason they love, each one loves the child who's opposite to him, is the very same reason they love one another. Rivka, the Ba'alat Tshuva, who comes from the outside, she really adores these people who grew up in holiness and who are very sort of pure and protected and tender. And she loves Yitzchak for this, and she loves Yaakov for the very same reason. Because it's different, and because he had the childhood that maybe she never had or she wished she had. And Yitzchak, the same thing. Yitzchak loves Rivka, his wife, who grew up abroad, grew up in another country. He never left Eretz Israel, but he loves this person who came from this world, and for the same reason he loves Esav, for the same potential that he identifies. He's on the outside, but then he can take all the same. He has the same things that I like about Rivka, I see in Esav. And they truly, very much, Yitzchak and Rivka, and this is very fundamental to where we're trying to go, is that they love each other very deeply. And although they love the opposite children, it's really just a reflection of how deeply they love one another. And in fact, there are several details that show us that they have the strongest love of all the patriarchs and matriarchs. How do we see this? We see this, that the verb to love in a relationship context, in a man-woman relationship context, appears for the very first time when Yitzchak loves Rivka after he marries her, and she enters Sarah's tent. Before, there was only one love. There was the love of Avraham to Yitzchak, which may even be for Ishmael, because Bincha yechidcha asher ahavta, your son, your only child. And he thinks maybe you're referring to Ishmael, and we said, no, I'm referring to Yitzchak. But anyway, it has to do with the love of children. But the love of a man to a woman starts with Rivka and Yitzchak and Rivka. Another thing is that all the patriarchs wanted to have just one woman initially, lechatchila. But they ended up not fulfilling their wish, because Sarah told Abraham to take Hagar, and Lavan cheated Yaakov into marrying Leah also, and then they both asked him to take their maidservants. But Yitzchak and Rivka were monogamous all throughout their lives. They're the only monogamous couple who not just aspired to be monogamous, but really achieved this. And we actually see that there was a point in which this was a choice. Why? Because this parsha begins when Rivka is sterile, she can't have children. And we know what women do when they're sterile in that time and place, because Sarah did this, and Leah and Rachel are going to do this. They take a maidservant and have her child be named by them and after them and be their own continuation. But Yitzchak and Rivka do not do this. Although it's very clear that this is a sort of norm or an accepted thing to do, and it's also a very natural thing. It doesn't require a miracle. There's no miracle involved. You take the maidservant who can have children. But when they're sterile for 10 years and cannot have any children, it doesn't even cross their minds. It's not even an option. What do? They start praying. And they're going for the supernatural, miraculous solution. They're skipping altogether the normal, natural solution to take a maidservant, because it's impossible for them to imagine having another person interfere with their relationship. So, and another thing is that later when we see them in Avimelech's court, he thinks they're brother and sister, and he looks at them, and then he sees Yitzchak metzachek, amuses, or entertains, or causes laughter to Rivka, and it's not any kind of laughter, it's a very intimate laughter, because that makes him realize they're husband and wife, so it must have been something very intimate. And so they're the only couple who were given a sort of glimpse of their intimacy, which we don't have regarding the other couples. So there's something, and the final thing is that the gematria of Yitzchak and Rivka, take the word Yitzchak and the word Rivka and put them together, then it's several beautiful words, but one of them, which is very much connected to this, is basar echad, one flesh, what we're told of after Adam and Chava are created, that a man should cling to his woman until they become one flesh. So one flesh is Yitzchak and Rivka. So they love each other very much, although they're opposite. There's no, even what's going to happen later on with the cheating and the stealing of the blessings, we know that Yitzchak agreed and thanked Rivka for this. And so this duality of the two children is part of this, and they like the opposite children, but it's really it's a reflection of their own love for one another. Now, just taking this structure, we can ask a simple question and immediately see how it becomes a problem. The question is, and that goes with what you asked me before, which kind of childhood or which kind of life story are we encouraging? The Torah is encouraging. We could ask this question. Who is considered better out of these two couples, the father and mother and the two twin children? So for the two twin children, it's absolutely clear. We see that Esav is pushed away, and Yaakov, who is the innocent, simple, straightforward, sincere servant of Hashem, dweller of tents, that's the thing that's how you should grow up, that's what you should be. This is the proper thing, and Esav isn't. And there's also something very similar regarding Rivka and Yitzchak, because when they're praying, Chazal, they look at the phrasing and then they see, it doesn't say that she prayed, it only says Yitzchak prayed. But the way it's phrased, that he prayed across from Rivka, Chazal say, well, that means she also prayed, and they were both praying. And then immediately after they say this, they say, but her prayer wasn't accepted. Because the continuation of the verse is that God listened to Yitzchak. And they say, why was her prayer not accepted? It's a prayer that they just added to the story because it wasn't there. So they add this prayer that she's praying, but then they say it wasn't accepted. Why? Because she was tzaddik ben rasha, she was a righteous person, son of a non-righteous person. So that means she wasn't as holy or as pure as he was. And his prayer was accepted because he was tzaddik ben tzaddik. So it's the same with Yaakov and Esav. We see here, apparently, just a few more minutes, that in both cases we have Yaakov's prayer being preferred to Rivka, and then we have, Yitzchak's prayer, and then we have Yaakov preferred to Esav. But immediately we also have a problem. Because if Yitzchak is the chosen one, and he's better, he's a tzaddik ben tzaddik, and he's so holy and so pure, how can he mistake, if it were up to him, Esav would be the one chosen, not Yaakov. And it's only through Rivka that Yaakov is the inheritor. She's the one who figures it out and understands that he was the one. And also, if we're saying that Yaakov is the chosen one by virtue of Rivka, what does it mean that Yitzchak, who was the previous generation's chosen one, or preferred one, he loved Esav so much? If we can't, favor him and admire him and then push this away. If he loves Esav, there must be something to Esav. So these two extroverts, or those whose initial state is being on the outside, being in the real world, not being protected, you can't escape them being a vital point of the story. You can say that his prayer is higher because it's tzaddik ben tzaddik, it's better to grow up religious than to be a Baal Tshuva, because forever your childhood sort of contaminates or stains your biography. But then we see that there's a big problem about this child who grew up religious and who grew up holy. He can't choose the right son. He can't see, he's going to go for the wrong son. And on the other hand, what does it mean that he loves this wrong son? There must be something here also. So we need to figure out in what way we're on the one hand saying that Yitzchak's prayer had this property of being, resting on the shoulders of his parents and being higher in this sense, and it was wonderful that he grew up so protected. On the other hand, he's lost without Rivka. So now what we're going to do in order to understand this is we're going to do a bit like Rivka and Esav. We're going to go out a little bit of the field of Torah, and we're going to go outside to this world and to modern day ideas. And we're going to take a very small but very powerful idea that was presented, was written by a modern day thinker, philosopher, who's Lebanese Christian. His name is Nassim Taleb. Very interesting fellow, who was originally from Lebanon, but he writes in English. And he's a very interesting man. And Nassim means Nissim, miracles, right? And he did what philosophers are supposed to do. He realized that something doesn't have a name, and he gave it a name. And he noticed that there's something that exists, but nobody calls it by its name. And everything is going to connect in a few minutes, but we'll just say what he's saying. He's saying this. He's saying we know that there are things that are fragile. They break easily, and they should be very much protected, like glass, like China. And then when you put them in boxes, you have to write fragile, because if they fall down or they hit by something, they break. Then there are things that are, his word is robust, or we can just say unfragile, non-fragile. You don't need to write the word fragile on their boxes. And if they fall down, nothing happens to them, like wood or plastic. But then he says, but there's a third category, and it doesn't have a name. And the third category is something that when it's hit, or when it's challenged, and when it's put up against stressors, when it's under stress, it benefits, it gains from this, it grows or strengthens from this. And the simplest example is a muscle. A muscle is neither fragile nor robust or unfragile. A muscle is something else. It's something that the more it strains, the more it grows. So maybe there's a micro breaking, it's micro fragile, but then on a larger level, it becomes bigger and stronger. The human brain is another thing that it belongs to the third category. Learning is all about challenging our brain, confronting things we don't understand, we're not good at, any skill acquired, anything, any learning curve has to do with confronting stressors, challenges, things you don't understand, things that you feel outside of your comfort zone, and then you need to and then you rise up to the challenge and you grow, and your brain grows. And in fact, you can say that people generally belong to this third category because our brains and our muscles, that's us. And we need challenges and chaotic things and things that would appear to come and break us, but they don't break us. They make us, whatever doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. So he calls this third category anti-fragile. That's his term. It's not a new word, but it's a new term, and the term is, it's not just unfragile or robust, it's anti-fragile. It's the real opposite of fragile. It's something that benefits or gains from difficulties and stress and chaos and uncertainty. And then the phrase that he has, a very beautiful phrase, goes like this, that's at the beginning of the book. And the book is called Antifragile. And he says, wind extinguishes a candle, but energizes fire. If you're a candle, you're fragile, and the wind extinguishes you. But if you're a fire, then the wind makes you bigger and stronger. So a candle is fragile, but a fire, a bonfire, is anti-fragile. And then he says, the same goes for chaos and uncertainty and randomness. You shouldn't hide from them. You should welcome them. And then he says, you want to be the fire and wish for the wind. That's his strong sort of encapsulates the entire book. You want to be the fire and wish for the wind. You don't want to be the candle, because then you're fragile. Where did I learn this about this person and these ideas?
What's his name?
His name is Nassim Taleb.
It's not that there is no concept like this in a Jewish books.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But sometimes it's nice when you come from the outside and you have this phrasing, and then it's sort of it vitalizes sort of the conversation. Then now we want to find this all. Now it's all in the Torah. But just one more thing, is that how did I learn this? Where was this brought about? His books are quite hard to read, but it's brought up in a wider context, in education, that today there is a very strong criticism in America regarding a trend that has become very, very strong. And in America it's very, very strong. Here it's a little bit, you can see it also, that there is a claim made that for the past 20 years or so, or more, 25 years, there has been a tendency to raise children in an overprotective manner. And this has created much damage. And then now they're so protected, and they're so used to being protected, that in Hebrew we say they're afraid of their own shadow. They find it very hard to confront adult reality. And then there's a bunch of sort of terminology or ideas that go along with this. One is called helicopter parents, that sort of hover around their children whenever they go, and they protect them. They don't trust them to make mistakes or fall or get bruised, and then they don't get bruised. And then they don't know how to deal with pain. And also, they find it very hard to deal with contrary opinions to their own, because they're used to thinking one thing. And then they find it very terrifying to even hear a lecture when that lecturer says something that they're not used to hearing. And then before lectures in the universities, they need to have trigger warnings. Trigger warnings and safe spaces. So trigger warnings are, before the lecture starts, or the article, or the video, or whatever it is, you should be warned. There could be a word that you may find offensive. You may find it may shock you, it may hurt you, so be warned, be warned. Yeah, and then the safe spaces are these rooms with, videos of little, poodles and relaxing music and the soft chairs. And if you hear it in the lecture, something that shocked you, it's just an opinion in a lecture, but it may shock you. It may harm you. You need a safe space. When Trump was elected, then there were a lot of people running to these safe places and having hugging sessions. And it all has to do with being overly intimidated. And they say the mistake those parents made over those 25 years, the big mistake was they didn't realize that people are anti-fragile. And if you treat them as fragile, then they truly become very fragile in a very negative sense. And people are anti-fragile, and they should be taught and being accustomed to from an early age to confront difficulties, to fail. If they get like participation medals, that's another overly fragile approach to. Then they what happens when they don't get a medal? When they come to the real world. And a very beautiful, tiny example of this is that there was the period of time that all the parents were hysterical about peanut allergies. And then there was a policy that all the kindergartens, nobody should bring any peanuts or anything that may have a residue of peanuts. And so no kid may have the allergy. And so it was implemented in all the kindergartens. A few years later, they did a big survey, and it turned out that the peanut allergy increased. The level of peanut allergy increased. There was more peanut allergy. And the reason is very simple. The reason is that when a child is not exposed at all to peanuts, he doesn't develop the chisun. How do you say chisun? Like an internal vaccination or internal resistance. So, okay, so now we have this story, and of course this connects very beautifully to Yitzchak and Rivka. Because it appears that Yitzchak is a very fragile child, and he was accustomed to being very fragile. He grew up very much protected. In Hebrew there's a beautiful pun that you can make. You can't make it in English. Well, etrog is very well preserved. Why? Because it has the little pitam that can be broken. So everyone wraps their etrog in something very soft, in cotton. And so this has become a verb. Me'utrag is protected like an etrog. Me'utrag. But if you just change you permute the letter slightly, it becomes me'utgal, challenged. So me'utrag, we can say that Yitzchak is me'utrag. He's like an etrog, protected inside a box, never leaves the land of Israel, doesn't meet the Canaanite women. Ishmael is taken away, Torah's children are taken away, and very much protected. He is, and therefore he becomes very fragile. And Rivka grew up on the outside, and she's anti-fragile.
Are you describing a certain period of time in his life? Because later it says that Yitzchak had battles with all the Shegrah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that forces him to a little bit confront, esek, sitna, all these words.
He was in the Akedah. I don't think he was so protected.
Yeah, well,
almost being killed.
Everything is relative. And in relation to when we're trying to abstract the difference between him and Rivka, then it very much holds. And again, even the Akedah, you can see that even there was an effort made to protect him, which in many ways succeeded. That he didn't know what's going on, and it didn't happen. So there are all kinds of opinions what's going on there, now how do we see the results of these two forms of education? How can we see the problems with fragility and maybe the advantage of anti-fragility? So later on, when Esav marries the two Hittite women, and it says that he married these two women, and then the next verse says that both Yitzchak and Rivka were very much displeased by this. And then the next verse is that Yitzchak became blind. So Chazal say, well, there must be a connection. Why is the description of his blindness coming immediately after the marriage of Esav with his two Hittite women, wives? And they say, well, there are several explanations, but one of the explanations for his blindness was that these two women would constantly light incense for their idol worship. And the whole tent was filled with the smoke of this impure, idolatrous incense. And he became blind because of this. And then,
wasn't it Akedah that he got blind?
That's another explanation.
But they say he was blind when he gave the bride to Yaakov.
That's afterwards. The order is that Esav marries these two women. It's by the time of the stealing of the brachot, it's absolutely clear that Esav does not merit to be the inheritor, because he's married these two women. A, he married the Canaanite women, and B, it was two. The fact that his parents were so monogamous, the fact that all the patriarchs wanted to be monogamous, initially, and he, from the very beginning, goes and marries two women, that's very, you can see that they're displeased, but I would say, but these two reasons. The fact that they're Hittite and the fact that they're two. It's...
Jacob also married two women.
No, he didn't want to. He wanted, that's what I'm saying. All the patriarchs wanted initially, and he didn't divorce his Leah, and he married Rachel. But that was the one he wanted, he promised to marry in the beginning. He didn't divorce Leah. He remained loyal to Leah. So, but then the Chizkuni, one of the Mefarshim, he asks, well, if Yaakov became blind through the incense, the smoke of the two wives of Esav, why didn't Rivka become blind? For the very same reason. They should both have been blinded. But then he answers, she was accustomed to the smoke from her childhood. So this is she was accustomed.
Also like because when people have their immune system.
Yeah, exactly. She was immune. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for before. I said resistance, but with the peanut, they become immune. And she was exposed to peanuts. She was exposed to idol worship. And she was immune to this kind of smoke. It didn't interfere. It didn't blind her. So now we see just a beautiful, beautiful example of how much Rivka symbolizes or embodies anti-fragility, and how Yitzchak embodies fragility. That because she didn't, because she grew up with idol worship, it didn't affect her, and her eyesight was maintained. And then, of course, he becomes blind in two ways. Yitzchak becomes blind in the sense that he can't physically, but it reflects another kind of blindness. I wouldn't say it's a spiritual blindness, because Esav, according to Kabbalah, is a very high soul. And he could see that his soul root is very high. But he was blinded in this worldly affairs. He didn't understand this world. He didn't realize, because he never was exposed to Canaanite women and their idolatry, and the world outside of Eretz Israel, and the world outside of the holy hothouse of his childhood, he couldn't appreciate just how bad Esav's situation is. He just saw his soul root. He saw that he's like his mother, that he loves so much, where he has the potential to be an amazing Baal Tshuva. But the mother did become a Baal Tshuva, and Esav did not yet. And he couldn't see this. He just saw he was so spiritual, so pure, so holy, he just saw the holy root, the soul root. And that's a big mistake. When you want to create a people of Israel, that's the next step in the three-step journey of the patriarchs. You need someone who's very spiritual and holy, and also someone who's understands this world very much. And Rivka, by virtue of this anti-fragile life story, that she could not be affected by the incense, because she knows what this incense means and this kind of culture it goes along with. And that's really the reason that she also liked Yaakov from the very beginning, because he was protected from this. And now she sees that, and she's able to see properly that Yaakov needs to be chosen and needs to receive the blessings, and Esav not. But now we have another twist. So now we made it so that now we can see the virtues of anti-fragility, and we see that this gives Rivka the benefit of being more sober, more, eye-opened, or to lucidly, soberly see this world for what it is, and to see the situation for what it is. But now we see something very interesting in the way she raises and leads Yaakov through all the steps. Because now we really see a combination of these two properties. What she's really saying or doing is this. She's saying, when you're a child, when you're just being raised, when you're born and you're small and you're little, you need to be raised in a fragile way like Yitzchak was, and like Yaakov is, dweller of tents protected. It's absolutely good. I didn't have that childhood. I needed to be Baal Tshuva. It was an amazing thing that I was able to do. Hashem helped me. But when you're lechatchila, when you want to ask, how is it proper to raise a child, you need to raise him like Yaakov, like Yitzchak was raised, very much protected. Because now we have to add something which Nassim Taleb did not realize. When he wrote that sentence, you want to be the fire and wish for the wind, he missed something that he himself wrote, and he didn't see the full reality of this. That you want to be both a fire and a candle. The candle is your soul.
Candle or flame?
The candle with a single flame. He said, wind extinguishes a candle but energizes fire. So the candle is the single flame. Within the fire, there's a single root flame. This is your soul. Your soul is very tender and very fragile. And you want to be the candle before you are the fire. Because the candle is your connection to your internal world, to your conscience, your conscience, and the inner core of your consciousness. And Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the candle of God is man's soul. The soul is like a candle, and how do you raise a candle? How do you protect a candle? You put it, you shield it, because wind extinguishes a candle, and you want to be both a candle and a fire. A candle has to do with your tmimut, with your innocence and your sincerity that Yaakov had when he was a child. And it was great, it was wonderful. That's why she loved him when he was a child, that he was a dweller of tents, because in the tent, the fire, the candle's single flame isn't extinguished. But then later on, when you grow up, then there comes a moment in which you now need to acquire all the opposite properties, and you need to grow from a candle to a fire, to a bonfire. I'm guessing that philosopher, and I think maybe I checked once, he doesn't have children. Many philosophers don't have children. And then they only think in adult terms. And so they're disconnected from the world of children. They're also disconnected maybe from their own childhood and innocence. And they live in a world in which they say you should be the fire and wish for the wind, and you need to be anti-fragile. But that's just half of the truth. The other half is that in order to be connected to your neshama, to your soul, you need to be a candle and fear the wind. And Yitzchak is a fearful person. He serves Hashem through awe. Pachad Yitzchak. Through awe and not through love. And the awe, the fear, is to lose the laughter, the joy, the beautiful play of the flame, which is your deepest neshama soul secret of who you are and the fact that you have a divine soul. And so this needs to absolutely be protected.
How do you know when to be the candle, when to be the fire?
So hang on. So now we see that first she says this is the first stage, and then when the time comes, what does she tell Yaakov? She tells him, now you have to hunt and make food like your brother. Then you have to put on a costume so that you look like your brother. And you have to enter your brother's shoes, really, or your brother's arms. And you have to pretend to be your brother and acquire the coarseness, the external, like the fire that wishes for the wind, like to be with having those strong arms, the muscles that you build through confrontation and lying and doing things that aren't, the dweller of tents wouldn't do. And then he dresses up like Esav, and when he comes to Yitzchak, who's now old and blind, Yitzchak says, that's interesting, the voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the arms are the arms of Esav. Because now he sees that there is a combination of the two. Yaakov is now he's now beginning to learn the secret of anti-fragility, of having not only the voice is like the flame of the soul, which comes across in a voice, in a whisper. But then the hands, that's like the external fire, the external force. And he adopts and puts on the arms of Esav, because she tells him, if you're it was wonderful that you grew up in the tent until now, but God forbid that you remain in your tent all your life, because then you're going to end up like your father. And the reason we have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is that each one makes another step forward. And You must not be like your father because you're not your father. You're the next generation. You're also my son. And I'm here. I joined this holy family in order to have the anti-fragility wisdom, sense, and to teach you that when you grow up, you're fragile. Your soul is fragile. The candle needs to be protected. But now that you're old, if you're going to stay in your tent, you're going to be blind like your father. You're going to misunderstand this world. And the people of Israel will not stand up on its feet because they're not going to understand. So it starts by learning how to be Esav, and then once that is through and he gets the blessings, that's just the introduction. That's just the first chapter. Then she says, now go to where I grew up. You shouldn't go, nobody should grow up there, but at some point you should get there. You need to get there. Go there, and he's going to be there 20 years. And he's going to become very anti-fragile. And he's going to come across liars and cheaters and unexpected things and randomness and chaos and all the things that this Talib philosopher is talking about. He didn't expect anything that's going to happen in his life. But that's what makes him grow and become strong and grow from Yaakov to Israel, who combats and vanquishes people and gods. And so this is the proper path of education that Rivka is laying out for Yaakov, which is really a combination or an integration of fragility and anti-fragility. And she's really saying there's a place for both, and there's also an order. The order is that first we need to light the flame and have the flame be protected and sustain itself. It takes time to light a candle sometimes until it holds. And then once it holds and it's strong enough, then not only can you become a fire, but you should become a fire. You should now learn to follow in Esav's footsteps, because Yaakov means to follow in the footsteps of Esav, literally in the footsteps, in the heels of Esav, and acquire his properties, the anti-fragile properties that Esav represents, but in a better way, in a much better way, in a way that also has. And if we're just going to read Talib and go in his, we're going to be like Esav. We're going to be very tough, and we're going to look at those parents that are overprotective, and we'll say they're wrong through and through. But it's not so simple. There's truth in every side. And the overprotective parents, they have something to them also. It's good to be a little overprotective when a child is young. And then you gradually have to lift up the overprotectiveness and also to push the child outside. You need to find the balance. And if you just said, no, let's be the fire, wish for the wind, that's terrible. That's someone who doesn't have children and who doesn't realize what the power of the soul is, that it's like a tender, very tender candle, which is very fragile. Now, so this, I think this is just amazing in and of itself, just understanding Yitzchak and Rivka in this sense, and seeing how they complement each other in such an amazing way. It also explains why Rivka loves Yaakov, because that's how a child should be, and why Yitzchak loves Esav, because that's how an adult should be. But Rivka teaches in the order of things. Like what took place before what, because the sense of ordering things is a this-worldly sense, which Rivka is much stronger at than Yitzchak. She knows the order. She says, you're right, his energy and light and power and energy, he's like a big fire, that's amazing. But it doesn't work that way, because it's going to be a very external, very chitzoni, it's going to go to outside places. You want to channel that fire in. For that you need to be a candle. You need to be under boundaries. You need to be the dweller of tents. Now we can see something very interesting in the history of Jewish interpretation. We can see there is a tendency in early generations to put the stress on the fragility element, and then only later in Kabbalah and Chassidut do we see suddenly the emphasis moving to the anti-fragile side of the equation. So how do we see this? So we see this in the Pshat of the Torah that says that Esav is wrong, And also Chazal telling us that it was Yaakov's prayer that was better, higher than Rivka's prayer. But later on in Kabbalah and Chassidut, Rivka and Esav are both very much elevated. And Esav becomes the embodiment of the Tohu souls. The Tohu souls are very high souls, they just don't have the right vessels.
What's that?
Tohu. Tohu, chaos. Tohu versus Tikkun, the opposite of Tikkun. Tohu in Kabbalah is defined as having a lot of light and energy and goodwill, but having very, very narrow, simple vessels to express that with. So what you end up is the breaking of the vessels. Tohu things and Tohu stages. It's like a bit like an adolescent. Adolescent is in the Tohu stage in his life. He has a lot of ideas and thoughts and emotions, but he's very young. He hasn't developed the right vessels. And so he breaks up all the time. He has crises. And they're also Tohu souls, that they remain sort of adolescent when they grow up also. And Yaakov is a soul of Tikkun, meaning he has very good holy vessels, like the tents. But his soul is not as high as. He needs to acquire the highlights of Esav. So, and this explains Yitzchak's love for Esav, and it explains a lot of other things. So anyway, Esav is elevated, and also in Chassidut, there's many explanations for the Hasidic rabbis. They couldn't accept the fact that Yitzchak's prayer was answered, and Rivka's prayer wasn't answered. So there's a whole host of Perushim that somehow turn it around, that her prayer was better and higher, and that was the one accepted, or Hashem put her prayer in his mouth, and then he accepted his prayer because really it was her prayer, and a lot of things in her. Or his prayer, he needed her prayer in order to go up, and all kinds of Perushim that make it so that her prayer was even, and you can see this. So you can say that Chazal wanted to, Nigle, generally, the revealed level of the Torah has to do with laws, boundaries, protection, preserving holiness, preserving sanctity. And then you become very fragile, right? That's the revealed level. But the more you go into the hidden level of the Torah, into Kabbalah and Chassidut, you see that they love the wind. The Hasidim love the wind. They love stories about shipwrecks and stories about people lost in woods, and people whose carriage is the wheel breaks and they lose their way, and stories of accidents. That's where you grow. That's where the neshama is revealed, because the anti-fragility. And in our generation, the most beautiful example of this transition from a fragility state of mind to an anti-fragility state of mind was what the Lubavitcher Rebbe did to Chabad. Chabad, 65 years ago, when the Rebbe became the Rebbe, it was a very closed up, fragile, Haredi world. Haredi means you put the stress on the fear, the wall, the being protected from the world, not being exposed to the world so much, because that's how you maintain a community of holiness. And Chabad were just like every other Haredi community. But then over the 40 years of his Admorut, he changed it all. And he says, now turn around 180 degrees and go out. And go out into the world and face the world and become independent and become financially independent and become, the Baalei Batim, the landlords of your own domains, and confront reality, and you'll grow. But on the other hand, on the inside, be very much committed to halacha, be very much committed to the Rebbe, be very much committed to the Hasidic way of life. Don't intermingle spiritually, but on the other hand, you should go and be there. And this combination is maintaining the light, the fragile light, the Yiddish neshama, the soul's light inside. But on the other hand, coming out of the tents and going out to the world and changing the world. And he knew that besides all the good that he would do to the world, he would also do good to them. They would grow up as individuals and as a Haredi community. They would, because he knew the dangers of over-protectiveness and over-fragility. And he knew that you need to, on the one hand, preserve the candle, very protected, very dearly, and make sure that when you raise the children, whether you're raising them maybe in a non-frum community, or in a place that's full of things that maybe you're not supposed to see, but you can find the balance. You can find the balance of protecting them on the inside, but also having them confront reality so they can become anti-fragile as well. And this, of course, when we think about education and raising children, this is, well, the beginning of an equation or the beginning of a formula of how we should go about this, that there's really advantages to both these ideas. And there's something to be learned absolutely about anti-fragility, and Rivka knows this. And Rivka makes sure that Yaakov goes and leaves Eretz Israel. Unlike his father, he has to leave the land and to go and mingle with the worst people. And on the other hand, she also knows that how to raise him in a protected way and to properly make this transition.
Internet remote.
Yeah, like not having cell phones when you're young and not being open to it. Today it's the internet. That's the main thing that we need to protect the flame, protect the children, because the internet extinguishes the flame. That's the wind. That's today's main wind. On the other hand, there should be a gradual transition to facing the world and to facing the uncertainties and chaotic element of the world and seeing that Hashem is really there also. And you really grow from those things. And the biggest things come to you. Leah, the unexpected wife, was the mother of most children and the mother of kingship and the mother of priesthood and all the things came from the unexpected wife. And the most amazing things come from this. And this is a really, complete faith, complete emunah, is to carry these two opposite truths and to see, and you asked before, how do we know when to make this transition? So when I started being about tshuva, then people would ask me, you're hiding your children from all kinds of things in the world, but don't you know that they're going to be exposed sooner or later? Well, I said, absolutely right. I know that they're going to be exposed sooner or later, but and I can't control everything, and I'm not, pretending to control everything, but it's my job to make some of these things later rather than sooner, and it's also my job not to be the one who introduces my children to those things. So it's going to come. The wind will come in.
The more mature to accept.
Yeah, the whole thing has to do with the word tam, with the word tmimut, innocence. I said tam, tmimut, but it's the timing of the tmimut, it's the timing of the tam. That there's a certain stage that tmimut is good, and beyond that stage it becomes naivete. It becomes tmimut in the negative sense. And then you need a positive kind of choser tmimut, of realism, of this worldly wisdom, prudence. But you have to have the tmimut before this, and you need to protect it. And when it breaks, don't be upset, don't collapse. Sometimes children's innocence is broken before you want them to be broken regarding one thing or another. And then you have to say it was hashgacha prati, then that the anti-fragility now has come into play. I didn't want it to be now, so what now I'm going to do with this? It's all for the good. It's all for the best anyway. The protection builds the fragility, and being exposed to other things builds the anti-fragility, and it's also good. And I'm going to do my best to make it the best way I see possible, and whatever it breaks, then I'm going to welcome the wind. I'm not going to wish for the wind, but I'm going to welcome it when it comes, because it must have come from Hashem also. And then I can really dance with the reality and with life and with the expected and unexpected, with the planned and the unplanned. I can try and go in direct ways, and every accident, every unexpected disaster, I can see, this grows my anti-fragility, it makes me stronger.
You see with kids that also maybe, if we're going with the metaphor with fire, to open the window a bit and then show them how to deal with the wind, or?
Again, gradually, that's what she does in the end. When she tells him, put on the arms of Esav, pretend to be Esav, and then go to where I grew up, that's exactly what she's doing. When she realized that the time has come. And by the way, how did she know that the time has come? Because Yitzchak is about to die and he's going to give the blessings. So it's not even that she sees that Yaakov is the right age. She sees that reality has brought us to the place that this is the right time to do this. She realizes there's a hashgacha here going on. This must be the time because now he's going to give the blessings of the elder. So you need to have a sense for timing, a sense for bina la'itim. When is the right time to open the window? When is the fire strong enough that it's not going to be extinguished, it's going to grow?